Hello again, everyone, and welcome to TTG New Zealand Fest panel discussion covering top tips and tricks for building and marketing bucket list itineraries, specifically outside of the summer months that don't just meet but, of course, exceed visitors' expectations. So, on screen with me today, I have the wonderful Louise Northbrook, Senior Country Specialist at Audley Travel. So, thank you for joining, Louise.
Thank you.
We also have Naomi Osborne, who's Client Services Executive at Prestige Travel. So, big thank you to you, Naomi, as well.
Thank you.
Today we're going to talk through why New Zealand holidays are so special in spring, as well as how to build those off-season itineraries and match different client types to their ideal destinations and activities. We're going to cover off marketing tips for attracting new and repeat clients as well. If you do have any questions throughout the session for Louise or Naomi, please pop them in the chat box. We'll be keeping an eye on that and taking questions from the audience as and when they come. My first question for you both is why you're an expert on selling New Zealand. How long have you been selling it for? Have you visited yourself? Tell us a bit about your background. Louise, shall I come to you first?
Yeah, okay. Hi, everyone. So I've been selling, very fortunate that I've been selling Australia and New Zealand solely, only those two destinations since I started in travel. So I've been selling it on and off for about 28 years. So I've been fortunate enough to go to New Zealand a few times. The most recent one was last year. I went for a month with work, which was incredible. And I also did one of the New Zealand Tourist Board ones a few months before that as well. So yeah, I've been quite lucky really to have been down and experienced it a few times.
Wow, amazing. I look forward to hearing all about your adventures in a minute. Naomi, tell us about why you're an expert on selling New Zealand.
So I've been working in the industry for on and off for about 10 years. I started when I got back to the UK after living in Queenstown in New Zealand for 6 years. So I was over there for quite some time, travelled around quite a lot.
Fantastic. So, Louise, let's start with basics. When is spring in New Zealand, and why is it such a great time to visit? I mean, can you tell us a bit about the different benefits that clients might get if they visit during that season?
Sure. Well, spring is our autumn, so September through to sort of November time. I think the main benefit is generally that you're going to get much better availability generally than you would do through January, February, March. Pricing's always a good option as well. It's tends to be better pricing in either of the shoulder seasons really, and you've just got lots of sort of advantages in that whenever you're actually traveling around, you're not going to have the same crowds that you'll get sort of during January, February, March. It's not the Australia and New Zealand school holidays, so there's sort of less domestic travel as well. The weather tends to be really good for traveling around as well. You're not going to get the high temperatures that you'll get in certain places during the peak months, which, especially if you're doing things like hiking trails, can be a benefit to just have it that little bit cooler.
Oh, it's good to know. It sounds ideal. And Naomi, how would you say a spring holiday experience varies across the country? Are there any regional differences that agents should be aware of and consider when talking to their clients about New Zealand?
So depending on when your clients are looking at going, which islands they're looking at, the temperatures can sort of vary from being like lovely and warm up in the North Island, up in like Northland, which can be up to 20 degrees, to down in the south, which can go down to 12, 13, maybe a bit cooler. So I would always advise your clients to take layers because it can sometimes be unpredictable. The availability, like Louise said, the availability of accommodation and activities can be better than in the height of summer. It's quite an affordable option of time to go.
Okay, brilliant. And then Louise, what type of traveller will enjoy visiting New Zealand in spring? I mean, what are the different demographics or client interests that agents should look out for in the customers that they're looking at pitching New Zealand to?
I mean, I think really for anyone, it's a really good time to go. But I think in particular, if you've got people that are really interested in doing some of the great walks in New Zealand, some of the hiking trails, its availability will always be better. But also, I think just getting like I said previously, just those slightly cooler temperatures, so it's not quite such a trek literally for them. But I think also as well, if you've got people that are really interested in wildlife, it's a really good time. You've got all the spring, you've got all the sort of the new animals. It's really good for bird watching. anyone that's really into the flora and fauna, if you go down to places like Tekapo, you've got spring's always really good for the lupins. So I think it's just you've always got the benefit of sort of slightly longer days. So those, if you want to be outside, you're just going to be able to get those better experiences, really more time to do things. But I think really, as a who anyone, it's depending on what your interests are, there's going to be something that's going to fit well in the spring. I don't think it's really apart from skiers.
Okay, fab. That's good to know. Who you shouldn't go there particularly in spring as well. That's useful info. Thank you. Okay, so Naomi, what would you say is the best place to start when looking at New Zealand holidays for clients? Would you say there are any pros and cons for choosing a tour operator's product over dynamic packaging a trip?
So time frames, budgets, and preferred methods of travel, they're all important key factors when planning a long haul trip to New Zealand. Being a tour operator, we offer the knowledge to be able to design a holiday that can meet the need of the clients, providing the reassurance that the holiday is bonded and that the clients will have 24/7 support while they're in destination.
Okay, great. And Louise, coming back to you, what sorts of New Zealand holidays and destinations would you suggest looking at specifically for a family adventure now moving into different client types?
Again, that you'll find something in most parts of New Zealand that's going to appeal to a family. I think certain areas probably lend themselves a little bit better for families just because of the range of activities. Places like Rotorua, you've obviously got lots there that's going to appeal for all different ages, whether people are interested in, kiwi hatchery for, those interested in the, teaching the children about the local wildlife. For those a bit more adventurous, you've obviously got things like the treetop walk and zip lining. So lots and lots of sort of family centered activities there. I think if you go down through like Kaikoura is always a good one with the whale and dolphin watching. Obviously Queenstown, when you've got again every adventure you can imagine with indoor skydiving and bungee jumping, maybe for those with slightly older children. So I think you've got there's something for everyone, with families everywhere in New Zealand. And then you've also got even if sort of connecting those regions, you can go down to places like Te Anau to do their glowworm caves, and you've got whitewater rafting. So I think there's certain centres that are better or have a greater choice of activities, but even the connecting the dots with the smaller places, there'll always be something that you can find for the children to do, especially if you've got families that are interested in the outdoors. They're not going to be short of things to do.
Yeah, it sounds like New Zealand's a real outdoor playground for children, doesn't it?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, great. So Naomi, coming back to you to talk about our next type of client, I want to ask about young couples. So maybe they're travelling for an anniversary or honeymoon. What shoulder season activities would you recommend for them?
So there's so much to do in New Zealand, much like Louise said, there's just so much to do there. So as a young couple, you've got lots of wineries in the country, so they could go wine tasting, Marlborough and Otago regions, being a couple of the best ones. A visit to Fiordland, to go to Milford or Doubtful Sound, really should be on every to-do list when you go to New Zealand. But especially an overnight trip there would be lovely. If they're looking at relaxing, you can go up to the Northland, go up to the beaches up there and get some of the warmer weather. If they're a little bit more adventurous, you've got the hiking trails around the national parks. And if they are that little bit more adventurous, they've got the bungee jumping and skydiving in Queenstown. We've got the hot pools and Polynesian spas in Rotorua. So if they wanted any sort of relaxing, romantic times there, then you've got those as well.
Fantastic, lots of choice. Louise, coming back to you, I wanted to ask next about clients who might be slightly older. They could have possibly limited mobility. What activities would you recommend for them, and what might you do differently about that itinerary or booking experience?
I think with actually with any age group, I think actually checking things like clients' mobility is actually a really a key point, because I found that quite often when you'll do even some of the sort of day hikes, or just trips where it's like a boat cruise with a nature hike, sometimes the local operator, what is easy for them isn't necessarily easy for a client, because it's easy for them because they're doing it day in, day out. So I think actually checking clients' mobility, if they're a little bit older, or if you can see them face to face and you can see that maybe they're a little bit less able, it's always worth double checking their fitness levels before you're booking anything that involves a walk of any kind. I think doing it in shoulder season rather than any other time of the year is potentially a good thing for mobility aside, just because there'll be less children around if you're doing it out of main school holidays, which a lot of older couples, they've done their time with their grandchildren and they're away on holiday for a break from them. So that's always a little bit easier, just less crowds everywhere. And actually, if somebody is a bit less able on their feet, then they could probably appreciate having less people around them all the time. So I think that's probably the main draw for older people doing it outside of the busyness of peak season. And actually, sometimes they don't always want the high temperatures either. They prefer to have it a bit more, a little bit cooler, a little bit changeable perhaps. But as long as you, like Naomi said, if you've gone with your layers and your waterproofs, you'll be fine at any time in New Zealand. But yeah, I think it's really just that lack of crowds. It's a big draw for them.
That was great advice, thank you. Now I've got a question in the chat from Jacqueline here. Have either of you been to Stewart Island? Do you know how? Doesn't matter. Do you know typically how long visitors would stay, or how long you'd recommend people stay on Stewart Island? Either of you?
Yeah, we would usually say about 2 nights minimum, sort of 2 to 3 nights. It's probably something that more either second time visitors do, or clients that are particularly interested in bird watching and wildlife. It's a really big draw for them. It's pretty easy to get to if you've got the time. If you're on a first visit and it's a little bit more restricted, it's harder to fit it in sometimes, because you do have to get down and get a ferry or a light aircraft over. But it's quite 2 to 3 nights minimum, really.
It's good to know. Thank you. And thank you to Julie for flagging Hobbiton in the chat. That's obviously a big destination for Lord of the Rings fans.
Yeah, all ages.
All ages, yeah, absolutely. We've got a question here from Tracy. What are your must-see locations for first-time visitors? Naomi, can I come across to you for that one? What would you recommend the big hitters are if you haven't been to New Zealand before?
So I would say the majority of people would fly into Auckland, so spending a bit of time in and around Auckland. Rotorua is a big one. You've got all the sort of geothermal activity going on there. It's a very Maori influenced city there. Wellington seems to be a bit overlooked, unfortunately, sometimes, but I would definitely recommend going to Wellington for a few nights and getting the ferry across to Picton. I think that's a definite must do. And then on the South Island, I would say Christchurch, you've got Mount Cook, you've got the west coast of Franz Josef and Fox Glacier, Queenstown, a huge sort of draw for people there, and then Fiordland to go and see Milford Sound and Doubtful Sound. I'd definitely say they're hard to narrow it down to just a few places.
Yes, I can imagine.
But yeah, there's so many good places, and obviously it depends on how long the visitors have got.
Yeah, always. Thank you. And Jacqueline, I can see you're agreeing with Naomi there in the chat on a couple of those. So that's fantastic to see. Thank you for the extra tips. Michelle, great to hear you're appreciating the mobility question. I've got loads of questions here. That's great. David is asking, what time do most of the attractions typically close for the day during springtime, except for the stargazing tours, that would be. Louise, do you have any insight into that?
Sorry, what was the question? What time do they close?
What time do most of the attractions typically close for the day during springtime specifically?
I think it very much depends on the attraction. So anything, if it's things like the glowworm caves tend to stay open. Certainly down in Te Anau, you can do those right through into the evening, because they're not really light dependent. If it was something like, I'm just trying to think of an example. I mean, a lot of them, if it's light dependent, then it would be around sort of dusk time. But then some of those attractions then have slightly different, but evening attractions. So things like the treetops walk in Rotorua. In the daytime, you can do the treetop walk, and it would stop at about dusk time. But then they have an illuminated one in the evening. So it could be that it's closes, but then they have a different sort of activity in the evening. And the same with places like Zealandia in Wellington. You can do it in the daytime, and you will see different sort of bird life and things like that. But you go in the evening, you tend to get more of the reptiles. So it's quite a lot of the attractions will have a daytime and an evening activity. So yeah, there's not really a set time, but I would say if it's light dependent, it will probably be around dusk. They'll close. And museums and things like that in the city centres, it would just tend to be same as most cities, sort of around sort of 6 o'clock ish. But it's very individual depending on the attraction.
Thanks, Louise. I've got an interesting question from Charlotte here as well. It's a very, very useful question, I imagine. Naomi, I'm going to come to you for this one. Charlotte's asking, can you take a car on the ferry across between the two islands if you decide to do both islands?
Yes, you can take a car on the ferry. Yeah. So yeah, you can. We can. It can be booked all through sort of as a through service. I guess you can book the ferry and the car at the same time. So yes, you can.
Okay, great. And then Naomi, I also wanted to ask about budget. And is it possible to visit New Zealand on a budget during the shoulder seasons? And what recommendations would you have for choosing or building an itinerary that doesn't cost the earth? And what kind of minimum price should travellers be expecting?
So yeah, it's definitely possible to visit New Zealand on a budget. The country offers an array of affordable accommodation options, from a motel style to sort of personable guest houses. If your clients are seeking a more independent trip, then they could opt for a motorhome holiday, which will give them much more flexibility and freedom, whilst sort of keeping the cost down. You'll also get slightly cheaper flight options in the shoulder seasons. So we would recommend, for about 2 to 3 week holiday, a minimum of sort of 3,500 to 4,000 per person, we would say.
Okay, good to know. Thank you. We've got a very specific question from Alison in the chat here. Louise, I'm going to come to you for this one. Alison has clients who are following the Lions in Australia next July and are tagging on a week in New Zealand, focusing on the South Island, but are worried about driving from Queenstown to Dunedin due to the risk of snow first week of August when they get there. Would you say the drive is worth it, or should they stick with Queenstown and fly to Christchurch? What are your thoughts on that?
Oh, that is a really tricky question. I haven't actually done that drive myself either, from Christchurch to Dunedin, so I don't actually know. But I don't. You might know that better, Naomi. Have you done that drive yourself when you lived there?
I have done Queenstown to Dunedin. I have driven it, but I don't know. I've never done it in August, so I mean,
yeah, I would say of all the drives, I don't think that's probably the worst one that you could do in New Zealand in August. But with the snow, I mean, the kayak community, you can get obviously snow chains and things like that. But I think if you're at all nervous of driving in snow, then probably the south of the South Island is not the place to be in August, because it is, it's a ski resort, so you will have icy weather, you will have bad weather. They're pretty good at keeping the roads clear, but it is. It's weather and it's unpredictable. So I would say if they're at all nervous, they would probably be better off to fly between points, and certainly avoid places like the West Coast during that time, because you never know if the Haas Pass is going to be open and you're going to be stuck on the other coast. So yeah, I think if you're at all nervous about driving in the South Island at that time of year, it's probably not worth the risk, and just fly between points.
Great, thanks, Louise. It's really helpful. We've got a question here about motorhomes from Tracy. Naomi, do you know if clients would be better off pre-booking sites for camper vans, and if so, how far in advance would you recommend they do that?
I would definitely recommend pre-booking the sites in advance. They book the motorhome. They get an app which allows them access to recommended campsites, which they can then pre-book themselves. So yeah, I would definitely book in advance.
Okay, great. Thank you. That's helpful. And Louise, coming on to luxury travellers as a client type, what shoulder season itinerary, accommodation, or experiences would you say that agents can confidently recommend to luxury travellers?
I mean, New Zealand has a huge amount of luxury lodges. So, if you have got those with a higher end budget, then it's a perfect destination, really. And you've got so many different ones to choose from, like the Lindis and Carry Cliffs and, some absolutely incredible properties. I think the beauty of doing them in shoulder season is that you have, they're beautiful as they are, but some of them only have a few rooms, so they can be really tricky to get into. So during peak season, you might really struggle to get into some of the lodges and the more boutique hotels, if they've only got half a dozen rooms. So availability will be a reason for, sort of pushing them for the springtime. But also then, even when you're there, that whole experience, you've got less people. So if you're paying a lot of money for a high-end property, and you get to feel it with almost nobody around, and some of the small boutique places, it's you'll get some real sort of one-on-one time with the hosts, and then some of the larger properties where there's a few more rooms, but they have sort of signature experiences, they only have a limited number of them, so you've got more chance of getting the availability to go off and do the the heli hike trip and things like that. So I think it just gives you that remoteness of feel as well, because there's you really will feel like there's nobody else around, because there probably isn't. So yeah, I think there's the high-end properties are good at any time of the year for sure, but I think springtime, it just gives you that little bit more sort of peace and quiet and chance to enjoy them even more.
Great, thank you. Okay, so the final client type that I wanted to ask about before we move on to marketing tips is solo travelers. So Naomi, this might be backpackers or someone looking to join a tour as a solo person. What advice do you have for selling to these types of customers?
So as a solo traveller, a tour can be a great way to meet sort of like-minded people. The main criteria I would say would be to find out exactly what your client is looking for, is looking to get out of the holiday, and then to provide tours that are going to meet the expectations of them, to ensure that they get the most from their time in New Zealand. So I think a tour is a good one. Also, you've got the guides there, they know what they're talking about, they know the best places to go and everything. So yeah, tour is a really good option for them.
Okay, cool, thank you. So the final section we're going to look at is marketing advice. So Louise, coming back to you, we know that tapping into trends is essential for marketing holidays successfully. That's no secret. But have you noticed any emerging trends in what customers are asking for and how they're asking for it when it comes to New Zealand breaks?
Marketing is not my strong point by any stretch of the imagination, but I think when it comes to trends, I think things like when it was mentioned earlier about the Lions, anything where there's any sort of sporting event will always whether actually in Australia or New Zealand, it will always draw people into the other country. So you've certainly got that. I think a lot of people look to social media these days for whether it's either searching for inspiration and or people that they're content that they're following, and they'll pick up tips from there. So things will come through. I've seen it on so and so on Instagram. It looks amazing, and that's always a good thing. And I think if you've sort of got social media pages, people will always look to those. I think people just kind of stumble across those more than anything, and that gives them the inspiration that they may look for. I think people are a lot more responsibly aware these days as well, and it's always a bit of a double-edged sword, because obviously they're flying thousands of miles to get somewhere, so I think they like to try and sort of balance that off a little bit with responsible travel. So any of the sort of eco lodges and things like that will always seem to be becoming a lot more popular, and people want to be aware that then having less of an impact and leaving less of a footprint when they are traveling. So Yeah.
I'm really pleased to hear you're saying that. I mean, responsible tourism is something we love to champion at TTG, so it's great to hear that the customers are on board too.
Yes, definitely. Yeah.
Great. And then Naomi, coming over to you, are you able to advise a bit on the channels that the Prestige might use to attract inquiries for New Zealand? I mean, would you recommend using email, social media, client events, brochures, window displays? Kind of, what are your thoughts on that, on kind of building a great marketing package or strategy?
So we have brochures. They're always a great sort of starting point for the client to give them an indication of what there is to do in New Zealand, and it allows them to get an outline of how they want to experience the destination. Social media and emails do provide a more flexible approach to promoting New Zealand, as you can focus on the inspirational itineraries as well as some more niche inquiries to showcase the different options that are available, and it can give an idea of what the clients can expect to pay for these holidays in terms of sort of inclusions and timeframes. So brochures are a really good starting point for them. Going back to almost like old school way of doing it, but it's always good to have it sort of in your hand, having a look at them.
Fab. Okay. And then Louise, just touching briefly on how you market to both new and repeat clients, or first time or repeat visitors to New Zealand. Can you talk us through your strategy for navigating these different client scenarios and how you go about marketing to those different types of clients?
I think with repeat clients to New Zealand, there's a lot more. You were saying earlier about sort of good itinerary for a first time visitor. There is definitely a very well trodden path for a first time visitor to New Zealand. So you can definitely sort of market that initially as like your highlights trip. You've got 3 weeks or a month. This is what you can do in that time. But when it's repeat clients, you can then sort of start looking into the more off the beaten track places, and maybe you could fit in one of the multi-day hikes and those sort of more niche products and more niche experiences that clients can have, and go into destinations that they may have not had time to fit in on their first time, and it's kind of, I guess just kind of tapping into providing them with inspiration for what they could do. That's if they want to go back and do exactly the same trip as before, but this is what you could do, and not many people go here, and so it's just kind of tapping into that sort of the differences between the bog standard well-trodden path to the new experiences that you can have.
Amazing, thank you. And then Naomi, coming over to you, what's your plans for marketing New Zealand to your customers in the coming months at Prestige? Have you got any advice for others that can learn from your expertise?
Well, we are going to be working more closely with our agent partners, providing more online engagement as well as agent events. We do have a new trade-focused website which is about to go live, which is quite exciting, and this will provide some downloadable content that agents can promote in store or on their own social media pages to help inquiries through to Prestige. We do also have a dedicated agent Facebook page, which is called Prestige Travel Agent Friends, which is there for help and any questions that anyone's got there.
Thank you. That is just about all we've got time for. Do you have any kind of final advice or comments to leave agents with, Louise? Or are we good? Do you think we've covered off most?
Yeah, I think we've covered off a lot. I think that the best advice I could give really is just really question the clients about what they want to get from the trip, and what kind of experiences they want to have, and just what their general interests are, because it just makes tailoring the trip that bit better and more personal the more information that you've got.
Amazing, thank you. Naomi, any final words from you?
Much like Louise has said, but also New Zealand's an amazing country, so make sure you get them to go, because if they haven't been, then they need to see what all the fuss is about, because it's definitely worth that long flight.
Yeah, well, I'm convinced. I haven't been myself, and I'm fully convinced now, so it's on the trick on me. And thank you for everyone who's tuned in to watch this afternoon, and for all your questions. It's great to see so much engagement in the chat and so much love for New Zealand. please do come back at 10 a.m. tomorrow. We have on the agenda an agent training experience or session from Tourism New Zealand, a self-drive themed virtual fam, so more self-drive tips tomorrow for those who are asking about it in the chat. We've also got a Siberia experience virtual fam, and of course our fun and interactive virtual hacker. Tomorrow will also be your first chance to answer questions for the chance to win those flights to New Zealand, plus the camper van hire on arrival, as well as the daily spot prizes. So chances to win coming your way. So thank you, everyone. Have a great afternoon and take care. We'll see you tomorrow. Bye.